I know that you, like I am, like to drive, and that's one of the other great things about these Bugattis and vintage Bugattis, the fact that the vintage Bugatti community, like the vintage Bentley community, are focused on driving. You know, they take these cars out on long tours. This car's been out on a number of the big Bentley tours, and they seriously enjoy driving the cars.
Yeah, they're wonderful cars to drive, especially this because it's, quote, the first modern Bugatti. You know, it's got hydraulic brakes, twin overhead cam, 3.2 liters, so you got lots of torque, and you can more than keep up with traffic. But the difference between Bentley and Bugatti is night and day. Bugattis are, you know, Bugatti used to call Bentley
the fastest
trucks in Europe, that kind of thing. And these require a deft touch. They're more spindly. In some ways, on a long trip, I might prefer the Bentley because it feels more robust, it feels stronger. These tend to be darty and you know, almost insect-like compared to, you know, sort of pterodactyl Bentley, you know.
Well, doesn't that also come from the fact that Bugattis started as Grand Prix and circuit racing cars as opposed to the endurance racing heritage of Bentley?
Right.
It's also quite interesting that, for me, the Type 57 chassis, although certainly not sophisticated, after the war, Jean Bugatti had been killed, unfortunately, in an accident testing a new car in 1939, and Ettore Bugatti survived World War II, and they tried to start up the company after the war, but never really got started in the Type 101 chassis to follow this development of this chassis. And it really wasn't enough for the post-war scene. Plus, as you mentioned, the expense of gasoline and the fact that the French government started taxing cars by their engine size and horsepower. So it really hurt the French luxury.
Well, they say Antoine Bugatti actually died of a broken heart. You always hear that.
Yeah.
You know, like Henry Ford, he demanded loyalty and rewarded loyalty. And when workers wanted to unionize or make something on their own, he took it as a personal affront. It was like, oh, all I've given you, and look what, you know, I mean, he was wrong, of course, but as an artist, that's the way he fell. And consequently, he lost his son, he lost his company, he lost his home, everything to the war. And when he came back, his health was not good, and he didn't have this, he didn't have anything to live for. You know, that was the sad thing, because right after the war, nobody thought of Bugattis as, oh, modern classics, you know? They were just old cars. And
expensive old cars.
Well, yes, but not I mean, old cars. I mean, they were...
in terms of Ettore Bugatti and restarting the company, you know, the last thing people were thinking about in France was a high-performance, expensive car. They just wanted to get their lives back together. It's very interesting, something you said, which struck an interesting thought in my head, because I hadn't really thought about the relationship between Henry and Edsel Ford and Ettore and Jean Bugatti, because both Edsel Ford really wanted to advance the company and take it to a new place, as did Jean Bugatti, and they faced a certain amount of resistance from their very powerful fathers.
That's right, that's correct, that's correct. Jean Bugatti was given a lot more leeway than Edsel.
Yes, thank God.
I mean, Edsel eventually died of a, what is it, lacerated ulcer or something from the father just constantly. You know, Henry Ford was an odd sort of character. I used to call him the brilliant ignoramus because he was brilliant in some ways, in other ways, and certainly a man of his time. And
Very much.
From 1900 to 1920, the smartest man in the world in terms of business and manufacturing. When people decided they wanted more to their cars, they wanted more style, more flair, he just took that as an insult. No, you just want practice. And,
I'm giving you what you need, not what you want.
Right, exactly.
And one of the other things that you mentioned, the fact about Ettore Bugatti having the soul of an artist, which is also a very important thing too about the Bugatti story, the fact that it was a family of artists.
Right.
Architects, artists, sculptors, furniture makers, really brilliant and very expressive people. And that's one of the things that you see. Even, you know, when we look later at the engine compartment of this car, you just see art and sculpture.
Right, and I have no proof of this, but just from what I've read of the Bugatti family, he was not looked on as an artist by his family, the way
Rembrandt was.
Rembrandt, the brother and the father, those were real artists, not making automobiles, you know, and that goes a long way into your psyche, you know.
Yes, indeed. It is something that also helped capture the imagination of so many people. The fact that you had these cars that were created by people who were mechanical engineers and designers, but artists in their own right. And I think, frankly, they redefined what artist meant.
Right. And it's interesting, you know, a lot of people, when you open the hood of a Type 35, it's almost cubist. Everything is square and cut off, and people think that was art. It wasn't. It's just that Bugatti hired so many kids from the fields and from the villages and just had them cut it this way and cut it this way. And rarely, like you see, almost every Bugatti has the engine sculpted, you know. With
the engine turning.
Yeah, the engine turning. That really wasn't done that often. Most of that was done afterwards to give the effect, because it took too much time. But he just had regular people building these cars and wanted to keep it as simple as possible.
But I'd also argue that it is in that incredible simplicity that art can be found.
Well, yes, I agree with that.
It's not self-conscious.
There's always style to everything that he did. Even if you look at a Bugatti Vice, it's just a Vice. But the way the logo is and it catches people's eye. Why do they collect it, you know?
Recently, a very interesting object came up for auction, which I really wanted to buy, and unfortunately I didn't. Ettore Bugatti's pasta machine.
Right.
Which is absolutely beautifully machined, and in fact, the wheel to turn the pasta machine was a Type 35 steering wheel.
Right, I remember seeing that,
Absolutely amazing device, which sold for about $30,000. So it was a bit more than I wanted to spend on a pasta maker. But,
I mean, we reached the point where, you know, I had an artist come to my garage. He wanted to paint my early Morgan three-wheeler. So he did the painting at the garage, and I said to him, how much is the painting? And he said, it's $25,000. And I only paid $18,500 for the car. So I would have had to sold the car to come up with the extra money to buy the painting. I mean, you know what I'm saying? But that's when you knew they were becoming valuable.
Exactly. And thinking about this particular car, which is amazingly original, it's been painted 3 times in its life. It has never been apart for a restoration. And I know that again, is something that you really resonate with, a car that still has the hands of the maker in it.
Right, yeah. No, this one, you know, you're only original once, and I've driven restored Type 57s, and they don't drive as good as this. You know, it just, the original way it was put together tells you something.
And I also love the particular style of this car. It's automotive math. This is called a 2-light Ventoux Coupe, and it's called the 2-light because it has 2 side windows and not a 4-light, which has rear quarter windows.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So the seat pillar is very, very broad and blind.
And I forget that this is a 4-seater.
Right, exactly. And it's actually quite comfortable. I've actually sat in the back of this car.
Yeah. See, that drives me nuts, having no window. I mean, just sitting back there, like, you have no idea when you're going to get slammed from the side.
Well, for the passenger, though, it's quite cozy.
True, and this was the last era of the Craftsman. Henry Ford did not employ any craftsmen. He employed just workers, $5 a day or $2 a day, depending on where you were. And that was it. They put the thing on, you know, there was the time distance studies or whatever they called them. Whereas I think Bugatti still had craftsmen. I mean, look at this steering wheel. Look how dainty it is and how nice it fits in your hand. It's just a comfortable thing to hold.
And all the joinery and the wood trim inside,
Yeah.
beautifully bent like a piece of Thone furniture.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
absolutely marvelous. And still that very sort of 1930s French industrial edge.
Yeah.
The flat metal edges of the sun visors and the mirror arm. It's just that wonderful combination of the modern and the very traditional.
Yeah, but still an old-fashioned car. You had that solid front axle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even Citroën was more advanced.
Oh, far more advanced this
At the
time,
time,
absolutely. But you know, again, this also says so much about the spirit of the French art object, and really speaks to the house that we're going to visit today, which is very, very, very much inspired by all things French and a certain lifestyle that Bugattis embodied in the 1930s.
Right.
Kind of carefree, indulgent lifestyle for the very, very select.
Well, I'm curious to see which house you have chosen for us, because I've seen a lot of houses. Only one I saw once that looked like it was from France, and I'm guessing that's probably the one. Is it on? It's on Bellevue Avenue.
It's on Bellevue Avenue.
It's kind of blue, French blue, sort of.
Oh, it's sort of gray and red and very, very, very French.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, let's
take
head
a
over
look.
there and see what it looks like.
So Jay, here we are at Belcourt Castle in Newport, Rhode Island. Here on Bellevue Avenue, this is the very personal vision of a really interesting fellow. Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont was the absolute definition of the turn of the century carefree playboy.
Right.
Even though he theoretically had a position in the August Belmont Banking Company in New York, and he was also a legislator for a time, his occupation was listed as socialite.
Right. Occupation.
Occupation, socialite. Something that would be a great college major, I think, today.
Right.
And this house is built as something which, frankly, to me, sort of seems like the car guy's dream.
Right.
Because this great building, designed by Richard Morris Hunt and completed in 1894, was designed completely with stables and carriage rooms on the first floor and reception rooms on the second floor and a single bedroom. So this is a one-bedroom bachelor pad.
Wow. But it's about, what, 50,000 square feet? Something?
At least.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's an extraordinary place built in the style of Louis XIII's hunting lodge at Versailles.
Oh, very nice, yeah.
As one does.
Yeah, all right, very cool.
Although the site opens onto Bellevue Avenue, Belcourt is actually oriented to the west rather than the east. The main entrance was on what is now a small side street off of Bellevue, and at the time it was constructed, the land to the west was open to the pond and out to the ocean. Although not designed for family living, it was a showplace for entertaining, with the banquet hall able to accommodate a sit-down dinner for more than 200 guests.
All right, very cool. Very
And
nice.
however, the bachelor life in this wonderful pad didn't last long, because in 1896 he married the former wife of his best friend Willie Vanderbilt, Alva Vanderbilt, the mother of Willie Kay, the great founder of the Vanderbilt Cup. And when Alva moved in, she came over from Marble House and said, you know, Oliver, this is a nice place, but we have to make it a real house.
Right.
And so she took his carriage rooms and made them a ballroom and put extra bedrooms in upstairs, and sort of the carefree life was over.
Yeah, not so much for that. No more social life. Yeah.
Exactly. But nonetheless, this certainly was, for the time, he unfortunately passed away quite young. He led quite a dissolute life, but nonetheless, he had a great deal of fun, and the house stayed in the Belmont family until 1940, and it was actually bought, quite interestingly, by George Waterman, who was a pioneering automotive collector, who had the intention of actually building a car museum here at Belcourt. but the zoning didn't allow it, so he sold the house on. Belcourt Castle has had only 6 owners since it was built, including Elaine and Louis Laurillard, who hosted a few editions of the Newport Jazz Festival at Belcourt, and its long-term occupants, the Tinney family, who furnished it with their collection of antiques. The current owner, entrepreneur Carolyn Raffelian, has made extensive renovations and restoration to Belcourt, which is now used for special events.
And this car fits perfectly. I mean, this, I think, a picture taken right here, you'd think we're in France somewhere.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's the most French-looking house I've ever seen.
It is absolutely extraordinary, and the spirit of this Bugatti is just absolutely matched with this house.
Well, we talked an awful lot about the engine. Let's show people what it looks like.
Another piece of French art.
And the inside is as beautiful as the outside. I mean, look at all the engine turning here on the valve covers. You have your twin overhead cams. Well, here, perfect example. Look at the oil filler cap. I mean, it's just, I mean, if you found this on the street, you would save it. It's just so beautifully made.
You'd frame that.
Yeah, and it's a Huile Bugatti.
Huile Bugatti.
Yeah, yeah. How do you
Bugatti
say
oil. Huile.
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 No.
I got some wheel on my hands. My hands are all wheelie
You don't
now.
want wheel on your wheels.
Yeah. And the CS. What does the CS stand for?
CS. Je ne sais pas. No.
I don't know. Anyway, but I mean, the whole car is built like this. That's what I love. The way it holds the way the clasp holds it down. Let's put it back here for a second. Okay, put that back.
People
on.
often say that Bugattis are a machinist's dream.
Yeah,
Because it's everything that a machinist wants to do if they had the time and frankly the talent.
And the interesting part is he was not above using outside parts if they were better. That is a Delco fuel pump, and that is I think an American distributor as well. Yeah, yeah. You know, I have a Type 57, and I have an electric fuel pump, but I keep this here just for looks, and I fill this with grape juice. And when I go to shows, people go, "Hey, why is the gas purple?" I go, "Well, it's French, it runs on wine." And they go, "Come on." And then I open it up and I drink, and they go, "Oh my God." I go, "It's very expensive to run it on wine though, because wine is, but yeah, it's just stupid." Yeah,
Which is very funny, because I think that normally they run the cars on the cognac, no?
Yeah, and this is one of the few Bugattis, and to have a fan. I mean, most Bugattis did not have fans because he felt you were always moving and there was no traffic, and it was
They were
fine.
designed for a different time.
Yeah, and it was France where the weather was reasonably cool most of the year. Just a different time. Now, I'm surprised that there's no oil air filter at all on this at all. It looks like there should be a sock or something on there.
Well, you know, especially for driving in today's conditions where there's lots of various things that you can pick up from the road, probably is a good idea. But as you said, this car is such a great car to drive, and it's a testament to the fantastic engineering that Bugatti achieved. I mean, even I was just noticing this, even the delicate curve of the water pipe. You know, it's an elegant thing.
Yeah, yeah. Everything here. Look at this. I mean, the way it curves down, the way it goes down. It's not easily could have been just straight across.
Straight across. And
yeah. But it just everything is just styled, and that's what I love about them. They're just such wonderful, wonderful cars.
And speaking of French style, there's nothing like a wonderful Renault 4CV.
Yeah, right over here. Let's take a look.
Jay, this is a 1956 Renault 4 Chevaux, or 4CV.
I know.
This is the French answer to the Fiat Cinquecento.
This is the first car I ever drove. When we were 12, we found one of these in a field, and it had been abandoned. And when we were kids, and we worked on it, and we got it running, and we would drive it in. We had 3 acres, and we would just drive in the backyard and just go in circles. And my mom would watch from the kitchen window doing dishes. You know, you could do that. I mean, we were in a rural area. You know, kids knew how to fix lawnmowers and tractors, so to get it running wasn't that big a deal. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, of course, today they'd call child services, and my mother would be in prison, and we'd be taken away. But back then, you could do that. Every day after school, we'd go back, and we'd just drive through the field, and we tipped it over once by mistake. And it was just a lot of fun. This is a great little car. So I have an affection for these.
And so you've got a much more personal connection with this car than most, because most people, of course, are very familiar with VW Bugs and perhaps
Right.
with the Fiats. But these Renaults were extremely popular in the United States, as they were in France as well. And they show that although it's a very, very small compass, they show the same attention to style and detail that some of the Bugattis show. And also, to your point about the effect on the market of the price of gasoline after the war
Right.
and taxation. So this was a car that would have been affordable for not only the typical family, but also, frankly, for somebody who was upper middle class, because they had to downscale.
Right, right.
And they were able to downscale without any diminution in style.
My Uncle Tony, who was the artist of the family, my dad had a lot of brothers and sisters. My dad was almost 20 years older than Tony, and Tony was an artist, still is, and he bought a Renault Dauphine.
Ah, yes.
And my dad had just bought a 57 Plymouth. And when he came over, my father, what kind of car is this for a man to drive? It's not a man's car. And then it had the two horn, meep, 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 had the city horn, the country horn. And my father just thought, what a ridiculous thing. How ridiculous, what a ridiculous looking car. He just thought it was the funniest thing that Tony would drive this little tiny car when you could have had a big car for the same money. Didn't make any sense. Yeah.
Which also is the point about an American family car had tons of space.
Right.
Whether you had the 2 children or 4 children, you still had huge space. This, however, is a large car for the post-war French family.
Right.
This car has a really interesting history. The second owner of the car was an American who bought it in France when the car was a few years old and toured for a month around Europe with his wife and 3 children in this car with their luggage. And it's a really neat model because it's got this soft top that folds completely down. So the
Right.
car is completely open with the side rails of the sedan.
It's, you know, this is the first 4-door I've seen. Most of them were 2 doors.
Exactly.
And there's nice little styling cues. Look at that air intake right by the fender.
It
I
is-
mean, instead of just being a hole in the side, it's got a bit of style, the little metal work around it. It's very
the
pretty.
little metalwork in the center is a stylized version of the Renault emblem.
Right, right.
It's really amazing. The chrome stone guards, and of course back here even the wings around the water filler for the radiator. And of course we were talking about the
How many
engine
times
detail.
did people put gasoline in here? You have to wonder.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sure they did a lot, especially in the United States where they didn't read O. But it's very simple, very basic, very industrial. It doesn't have, obviously, the flair and the style of the Bugatti, but it's still something that shows attention to detail.
What is it, about 700 cc?
750 cc,
750 cc.
28
and-
horsepower.
28 horsepower, okay. Well, that'll get you out of it. That'll get down the road, all right.
Exactly.
I always like the fact that the generator is like almost more
Half
than
the size of the engine.
Half the size of the engine, yeah. A beautiful little car.
Yeah, it's a really neat piece. And then, of course, we have another Bugatti.
Ah, actually, I have a connection with this one. Well, this is an impressive automobile.
Indeed, a 2013 Veyron, a special edition called Le Ciel Californien, the California Sky.
Right.
This is the very first open-topped Veyron.
Right, this lifts off, right?
Correct.
But you can't store it in the car.
Well, you can sort of bungee it to the back if you, but
Yeah,
no, it does
no.
not store in the car.
Yeah.
Of course, the Bugatti Veyron was a legendary model when the Volkswagen Group had the rebirth of Bugatti and the wonderful 1,000 and then 1,200 horsepower
Right.
supercar. Legendary performance and very much in the spirit of what Jean Bugatti certainly was looking for. Ettore Bugatti, I think, might have found this a bit much.
Right, right. Well, it's funny because in 13, 1,000 horsepower was just so over the top ridiculous. Now you can get a Demon with 880 I mean, we're already there. It's amazing how quickly it moves. This car is interesting because I own Pierre Véron's Grand Prix car, which is painted white and blue, and this is sort of an homage to that car.
Exactly. Of course, Pierre Véron being one of the leading Bugatti race drivers of the time.
Well, race driver, resistance hero, fought the Nazis, raced car. I mean, it's just a wonderful story, you know. A race car driving guy fighting Nazis, you know. I mean, just an amazing story. And I did not even know it was Pierre Véron's car. I had it for a number of years, and when I got it, there was tons of paperwork, and a huge file came, and it's always beautiful weather in California, and one day we had like, or 1 month we had like 4 weeks of rain. So I said, let me go through these, and then, oh my God, letters from Pierre Véron, and it was his car, and oh,
and you had no idea when you bought it.
Yeah, I notified the factory, and they asked me to bring it to Pebble Beach, and we had it on the stand alongside this car, so it was kind of fun. It was fun.
And that's one of the things that both the people who have revived the Bugatti marque, Romano Artioli with the EB110,
right,
and currently the Volkswagen Group, are very, very careful about maintaining the ties to the historic cars. They want to make sure that people understand why they're making these cars and what these cars mean. And I think that makes a marked difference between a lot of the people who have attempted to revive marques,
right,
and buy in somebody else's engine and do all sorts of things that don't really speak to what the marque stood for.
Well, Artioli did a good job. It was just a bad time. There was a recession.
Absolutely.
And being Italian, I did the foreword to his book.
Mm-hmm.
And being Italian, he put so much passion. I remember seeing pictures of the factory with beautiful hand-painted tiles on the floor, and I go, it's a factory. I mean, why are they putting all this money in?
But it's Bugatti, it's art.
I mean, it was art. That's what it was. Even now, even in the factory's in total decay, it's been abandoned for almost 20 years. It still looks beautiful.
It's a beautiful thing to see.
There are vines growing through it and everything now, but you see what it was. And they got off to a pretty good start, but then it didn't come together.
Well, you know, it's building a supercar and marketing a supercar are two very different things.
Right.
And again, I think today it takes a group the size of the Volkswagen Group to really sort of keep something like this going, because this really is a labor of love. I mean, obviously they make money on these cars, but they don't make the margin on one of these cars that they make on a VW Golf.
Right.
So
I think they had to sell 350 of these at millions of dollars a piece to break even.
Exactly.
And that's about, and I think now they're doing okay. But
and it's also, it's great to look at this particular car, because also inside, it really has that kind of level of detail and art that we saw in the Type 57
right,
in a totally modern idiom. It's not overstyled the way some cars, for instance, a Spiker might be.
Right.
But it still has enough detail that really sort of catches your interest, and also frankly fits with the character of the car.
And it's funny because I think it is the heaviest supercar or hypercar ever built. These are about 4,200 pounds.
So you need those
yeah,
quad turbos,
and you have what, 10 radiators in it, I believe. You have differential, oil. I mean, just everywhere.
This W16 generates a lot of heat. You can just tell it after this car's been running. You stand next to it and you can just feel the heat radiating off it like a race car.
You know, it's funny. I know it has 16 cylinders. So does everybody else. And people will come up and go, "What is this, 12 V12?" No, it's a 16. They just. It doesn't register in people. It says 16 right on it, but people don't. They just go, "No, it's a 12." No, it's a 16. 16. How could it have 6? They don't get it. It's in 3 banks, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's
a W16.
W16. It's based on that old Napier Lion kind of
exactly
aircraft. Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating, the most complex car. Oh my God. I mean, just changing the tires and is a huge deal. I think the wheels have to go to...
Every 3 tire changes, you have to change the wheels because the tires are bonded to the wheels because of the performance of this car. And it's very interesting with the Veyron that the Veyron is not limited necessarily by the road, it's limited by the tires.
Right.
It's a limited number of minutes at top speed on the tires.
And people don't understand why it costs so much to maintain one of these, because since a car is capable of over 250 miles an hour, it should be legally able to do that at any time.
Exactly.
Most people don't go over 80 or 90 probably. Maybe take it up to 100. But because it can do 250, the tires, everything must be tested at ultimate speed. So consequently, you're paying for something you will never, ever do. And that's what is a bit frustrating. I mean, I'm sort of glad that modern supercars are limiting themselves to 212 or 215. Mm-hmm. So we're not buying tires that are 10 times more expensive because they're 30 miles an hour faster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the things which is quite interesting about driving these cars and this car is that it has a gauge indicating the number of horsepower actually being employed at the moment.
Right.
And most of the time driving as aggressively as you can around town, you might use 100 or 200 of the horsepower available.
Right.
Certainly nowhere near 1,000
Right.
or the 1,200 that's available.
But it's amazing. The first time I drove one of these, you put your foot in it, and the acceleration it's like a jet plane. Taking off and landing are really exciting. Everything in between, it's a heavy car. You know, it's a big car.
But it's very smooth. It's very smooth.
It is
You know,
smooth, and it's impressive. I mean, it is impressively smooth, and I mean, it's an amazing engineering feat to get this much power. And it's only 8 liters, right? About?
only 8 liters,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
And so if you really want to experience what true smooth French power is like on the road,
Yeah.
let's go for a ride.
Yeah, cool. Let's do it. Let's get
No, actually, we're going to go for a ride in the Renault. Come on.
Really?
True French style.
I'm 12 again. I could get in this thing easier when I was 12.
As you can tell, as we cruise on Bellevue Avenue here, the driving experience is just like that Type 57.
Well, you know, it's kind of fun. To me, all modern cars kind of drive the same. So to have different experiences, cars that are completely different from one another, is actually fun and exciting to me. Like this, it seems lively. It's not really fast, but because it's small and light and revvy, it seems peppy, as my dad would say. It seems to move along pretty good. And it's not uncomfortable. I would say the leg room is about the same.
The legroom is actually terrific in this
actually
car.
has probably better leg room. Does this seat go back?
The seats are also very supportive as
Yeah.
well. I think that seat might be
I think it's
semi-fixed in place.
Yeah, yeah. There's some clever things about the interior of this car. For example, my knees, I can have them fairly wide apart because the door, there are cutouts in the door to give you a little more room. Since the windows don't go down, they give you that extra width to the car.
Exactly.
Which is kind of fun.
Real practicality in terms of the utilization of space in the car to make the maximum use of a very small interior volume, which would allow you to actually put your family of 5 in the car and go for a trip of some distance. You know, it's
And
not
you know
just a city
something?
car.
If you didn't look at the speedometer, you'd think you were cruising at normal cruising speed because you're low to the ground and it's kind of buzzy and you're moving along pretty good. You realize we're only going, this is kilometers, right?
Kilometers. We're only going about 40 kilometers
40
an hour.
kilometers, which is what, 25 miles an hour?
Precisely.
But if you asked me to guess, I would say, we're doing 40, we're doing 50, you know. So it's really fun. I see why I was enamored of this car when I was 12. Because I like it just as much now as I did back then.
Is it a time machine, a fountain of youth?
I mean, it is kind of fun when me and the other kids, we just get in this thing and we just drive in circles for hours. What fun was that, you know? It just makes me laugh.
And when you think about some of the small cars that also were prevalent here in Newport as city conveyances, you know, so it's the kind of thing that you would take from your house out to the beach or to go for a ride up in the country. You know, it's the perfect vehicle for that.
You know, it's funny, French cars never really caught on in America, not because they weren't good or they weren't interesting. They just never had the corporate backup. You know, for most French manufacturers, if you owned a gas station and you wanted to be a Citroën dealer, you just call them up, yeah, and they send you 3 cars and you'd sell them. Or Peugeot. You know, I know people that had Peugeots and other French cars, and you always had to go to some independent guy to get parts. There was no dealership set up like you'd have with British Leyland or General Motors or anybody like that. And it's a shame because they truly are fascinating automobiles and they're built differently than almost any other kind of cars.
They display a true national character, and it's interesting that philosophy of distribution actually helped them in terms of sales, but the lack of support in
Right.
that distribution network really hurt them, because in the late 50s, actually, Renault was the best-selling foreign car in the US, far
Yeah.
outselling Volkswagen. But of course, the Volkswagen organization was built to a standard of service that the French and the Italians just simply could not match.
And plus, you know, France was much more integrated in American life. When I was in school, we all had to take French.
Right.
Now you take Spanish and possibly German too. But French doesn't seem to be even up there anymore. But every kid took French in the 4th grade and the 5th grade when I was a kid.
I figured that actually if I took Spanish in school, then perhaps I might want to drive a Pegaso.
Right.
So it's just the way I sort of think. But it is very funny what you say. The prevalence of French and French style. I mean, the height of cuisine was going to a French restaurant, and you know, so many of the great houses were built in the French style.
Right.
And the French were also quite consistent in their expression of the way they wanted things done. They didn't bow to other markets.
Right.
This was not built for the export market. It was built for France and exported.
Right.
So driving this, you feel like you're driving a little bit of France.
Right. But it's a very nice car to drive. I mean, this is actually a lot of fun. I would love to own one of these again.
And just imagine what it'd be like driving this on a nice sunny day with this full top open.
Oh, yeah.
With the sea breezes. It'd be
Although it
absolutely
drives me
delightful.
nuts that the windows don't go down, or you can't even take them out, and you have no synchro in first. I can't down. Okay, now I'm in first. Okay, hilarious.
But I do love these big vent windows. They'll turn
Right.
all the way around. They give you all the ventilation you really need.
The trouble is
although
when-
yours hits your hand on
The trouble is when you
steer.
get up to speed, the window blows shut, and you have to hold it open.
That's called automatic temperature control.
Right, exactly.
You know, Jay, we talked about these cars in terms of their performance. Cars like this, the Fiat 600, these little 4-cylinder cars that would be generally considered just city cars in the US. And this car, I have to say, has better pickup from rest than the Fiat 600.
It does.
It's got real power immediately, which is one of the things
it's
that...
a 750 versus
750,
600.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's the big block.
The big block version. That's right.
Exactly. So it makes all the difference in the world when you have that kind of power differential. And 28 horsepower, it does certainly feel like it's got more than that. It's also finished really well in the interior, you know?
Nicely done. You think the horn would be here because of this button, but it's not. It's out here. There you go.
I think it falls more readily to hand.
Yeah, well, that's true.
And of course, the gauge cluster is remarkably complete with a speedometer and the water temperature gauge and a gas gauge and warning lights for oil and charging. So everything you need to know. Anything else you
But
don't
it's
need to know.
amazing how remarkably unsafe these cars were. I mean, if you got hit by a kid on a bicycle, this thing would fold up fairly quickly.
So let's watch out for the bicycles. There are a lot of them here in Newport. So Jay, today in our visit to Belcourt Castle, we've seen all manner of French style, from Louis XIII to Ettore Bugatti to Louis Renault.
I like Renault. I always like Renault as a brand. And, you know, they say that the birthplace of the automobile was Germany, but France was the nursery. And it's really true. I mean, the System Panhard and all of that all came out of French. System Panhard means the idea of engine in the front,
Right.
transmission in the middle, rear end driving the car. That's the System Panhard. And it seems almost second nature to us now.
No one had to think of it
No, but
because it's always been.
Somebody had to think of it. That's right. The French did. You know, it's a classic case of government interference. I mean, France had so much engineering and everything else, and then they decided not to build luxury cars anymore.
No luxury cars, no sports cars.
I think that's the socialism all the Republicans are scared of. The fact that you couldn't build cars that people might want. You had to build only a people's car. And consequently, those that were successful and wanted something more had to leave France and get a Mercedes or an American Cadillac or something of that nature. And it's interesting.
And while it certainly encouraged the development of really imaginative small cars, it's always nice to have the choice. And today we had a great choice between that spectacular 1936 Bugatti and this absolutely wonderful and charming 1956 Renault.
Well, and also well, you know what's interesting? Of the three cars, I think I and most people would choose the Bugatti,
Which Bugatti?
the Type 57.
Type 57.
Yeah, yeah. But the interesting thing was, 100 years from now, if you found the three cars we tested today in a barn, the only one, or the only two you'd be able to start reasonably quickly and drive away would be this one
right here.
or the Bugatti,
Right.
or the Type 57. The Veyron would be beyond. We don't have the electronic equipment. We don't have the. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of interesting how that is. I mean, the golden age of the classic car tends to run from about 1920 to about 1976. Beyond 76, all the electronics come into play, and it just gets a little complicated.
Although that too is a very interesting conversation, because I think that we have a new generation of people growing up today that will become entrepreneurs in the electronics and the computer sectors to allow cars like that 2013 Bugatti to be restored and developed and maintained for years to come.
Well, that's true. You know, a lot of times when I have young people come to the garage, you show them a drawer full of carbureted jets, and they just, oh my God, how complicated is that? Where
Right.
It seems pretty easy to me, and yet they take out a laptop and hook it up to a Nissan Skyline or something, and I go, oh God, I have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. A member of our team has a great app on his smartphone where, as he's driving his tuned BMW, he can key into the app, press a button, and change the performance settings on the chip in his engine.
Wow, okay. And then crash while you're doing it, yeah.
Well, hopefully not. I'm sure that it's in a handle and quite safely handled.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you feel you need all 28 of those horses.
We're
when you
climbing
come
the
to
hill
a
now, yeah.
Yeah.
You just imagine the fun that family of five had cruising around Europe in this.
But
Going to
they had
adventure
a
to
lot-
adventure.
I imagine they did have a lot of fun, you know? Because really, when you're not in any hurry to get somewhere, the journey is, you know, Americans, they have to get to the place. But to me, the fun has always been the journey to the place. You know, what I'm driving is always way more important than where I'm going. Because most of the time, I'm not going anywhere. I just enjoy the driving part of it. I must say, these three cars today do make me miss the French culture we used to have in America. You know, as I said, you know, a French restaurant was the height of elegant dining. French cars were the most comfortable. Even French pop star Charles Aznavour used to be popular in America.
Exactly.
When I was a kid, there was she used to be on the Ed Sullivan Show all the time. The singing nun, you remember her?
Ah, yes, Dominique
Yeah. But
Jay, your French is so good.
I know, I missed that. I missed that. So
Well,
hopefully, maybe we'll start a revival of French culture here in America. I mean, how aghast would the French be to see me touting French culture? That would be pretty much the end of it.
well, we live in this wonderful world of essence, huile, l'eau, les automobiles françaises,
Yeah, I have no idea what you said. I heard automobile. That's all I got out of it. But
and how can you miss?
that's right. Let's go get some brie sandwiches and have some lunch.
Allons!
Allons.